I mean, I think back to my mom. Like, my mom didn't get her first credit card in her name until she was like 35. Right?
Wow.
Just wasn't allowed, right?
Yeah.
My mom didn't buy her first car with her own money until she was 47. You know, I talked about these things with her recently, and just like thinking about that and then watching what these clients are doing, what these women are doing, it just makes my heart sing.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
So continuing on our professional education series with the interview that we had with Jeni, today we're lucky to have Jeni Nunn join us from Coldwell Banker, who's going to talk about real estate.
Yay,
so welcome.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Jeni.
Thank you both. This is really exciting for me.
So why don't we start with a little bit of background? So tell us a little bit about how you got into the business and what is it about it that you love?
So it's kind of an interesting story. I was raised in a family where like the biggest aspiration was to be a wife and a mother. So that was my trajectory. And so anything that I've done beyond that has been like gravy, you know, on the mashed potatoes kind of thing. So I started out in property management. My husband and I were trying to find creative ways to save money on rent. And so we started out in property management. I was getting my degree. He was very encouraging for, which was not something I was expecting I thought he was on the same plan as me, which was like, we're going to have babies and you're going to stay home and this is what we're going to do.
And you're going to buy the house and the 2.4 kids.
Right,
and
the white picket fence. Right, yeah. And so I even did a blog on that once when blogging was a thing, like about the white picket fence. But so did the whole like going to school at night and working during the day. We were young marrieds, and so we were property managing to save money. We did that. We scrimped and saved and sacrificed, and then started to get enough money for a down payment. So then when we started to do that process, we were looking for realtors, and we ended up finding one and going with her, and then buying our house. And I fell in love with the process. So I fell in love with looking up houses and walking through houses. And then not only that, but once we bought the house, like following what my neighborhood was doing. And so I was really, really into it, as well as continuing to be in property management. And the nice thing about property management was that I had some flexibility to have babies, which was the goal, right? So I was able to do that and continue. And then just kind of one thing led to another. We ended up building a backyard house, and in that process met a realtor that our contractor recommended. And so that was the first realtor. Even though we had a realtor, we had to find first-time home buying experience. That was the first realtor I had ever met that like impressed me and that felt genuine and was not just after like a sale or a transaction, right? And so we met him, and he could tell I had like a knack or like a real strong interest in this. And I was asking lots of questions. I mean, I started asking him like, and I have like a 10-week-old in my hands, right? I'm asking him like, how many hours do you really work a week? Like, what is it like to live in your shoes? And so anyway, he said, take me out to lunch and I'll pick my brain and and I was like, okay, that's not like me. Like, I don't go on one-on-one luncheons with men, right? So I did, and the rest is kind of history.
Wow, what an investment for a lunch,
I know, right?
To create a career
I
based
owe
on
a lot,
right?
And honestly, until he said that to me, he said, why don't you take me out to lunch? Like, I can tell you're interested in this. It wasn't until that moment that I was like, oh, I could do this. Like, I'm not just asking because I'm interested. Like, he made me realize I was asking because it could be for me.
Right.
Yeah. That's a huge lesson for us all to learn, because as we get older in our careers, it's time for us to mentor and invite somebody else into the business. Yeah. So that's really a nice story.
Well, and I applaud you for surpassing expectations from the standpoint that, I think you had shared before that it would be gravy if you did anything other than, to be a mom and have kids. And yet, you found yourself in a career and doing well in a very challenging market.
Right.
To say, it's one thing if you worked in an area where, there was tons of buyers and sellers and stuff, and it was easy, but this can be a challenging market. And, with all the housing crisis that we faced 10, 12 years ago or so, and to be able to navigate through that shows that, you did have the aptitude and the strength to be able to get through it.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. It's a good way to look at it.
And we also have to mention that I'm just amazed because you have 4 kids, right?
I do.
Okay, I'm glad I got that right, because sometimes people have 5 kids, and I always stop at 4.
Right.
And they're like, no,
the brain
I have
doesn't
5.
compute after 4. Right.
I know. So, but the fact that you do all that, have time to be with your kids, and have the career and whatnot, it's like, wow, you are superwoman.
Well, women are very big in my life, and I owe a lot to the women in my life, and they've shown me all sorts of different examples of how to be a woman with or without a career. And I think not everybody gets to have that many great mentors in their life, and I'm really lucky to have those.
Yeah, I would say the same. I have a lot of people in my life that have given me a lot of tips along the way in my career and in my personal family.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because you need both, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to continue having people like that inspire you and keep, a very positive, environment, for you to thrive, for you to be able to really take things to the next level, right?
Yeah.
To push you, almost from an accountability standpoint,
right?
Too.
Yeah, and I think some of the way I was raised was without that expectation, and then for some reason I used it in the reverse, right? Mm-hmm. Where I was like, well, that motivated me to actually do something a little different. I think it's the whole doing different than what you were raised with, right? That motivation. So
one of the biggest compliments I've ever received in doing business with a client was when he asked me to give him advice as if I was his big sister. And, I take my responsibility as an advisor super high, but then that added extra of being a big sister, oh my gosh, then I wanted to take care of him, even more, it seemed like. And so now I like to think of that with my younger clients, that I'm like a big sister, and I'm just helping them and mentoring them. And so that's one thing I really like.
Yeah. And I think personal part of the business is huge, because this is the biggest financial transaction of their lives. And so that I feel the same way. I take that role very seriously. I haven't looked at it as like a big sister, but maybe because I am the youngest of 5, but I'm very much like, what would I do if I were you? Here's my, there's opinions that are involved in and a computer can't give you those, right? Mm-hmm. Or that, advice that's just golden. And some people just aren't thinking of different things. And so making sure that they're, that they know and they can feel from me that I do, I'm giving my honest opinion and my honest feedback, and it's huge.
So I think it's funny because you're the youngest sister too.
Oh,
yeah, I am
the youngest sister. So now you get to be a big sister for people.
Yeah,
I should look at it that way. I'll finally feel responsible.
But we're talking, as you mentioned, the biggest financial decision or purchase that someone might make, especially here in California where homes are pushing over $1 million easy, So how do you help people through that process, especially if they're buying a home for the first time?
Yeah, first-time home buyers are honestly one of my favorite clients to work with. They're just so new. It's so exciting and scary and daunting. And I remember all those feelings and feeling like there's no way we're going to do it here. There's no way. And, I joke that we begged, borrow, and stole to get into the market, but really we begged, borrowed, and worked hard, right, to get into the market. And so I try to tell my first-time home buyers things like, if you can live in this house for 5 to 10 years, you'll be making a good investment, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at a 2 to 3 year home, and it just depends on what time you are in the market, and we're in October 2019. We can talk about how the market's changing later, but I think for first-time home buyers, it's just really important for them to think outside the box, get creative, get prepared. So some things that I've told them too is like, be creative. You know, you can have, especially if you're a single woman, a quarter of my business has been single women, and 2 of them have been teachers. Right. And so like, that's like one demographic you think is never going to be able to buy a house in the Bay Area, but they have, or they are. There are programs out there, that are making it a lot, because people know that the Bay Area is so unaffordable. The state knows, right? And so they're helping that demographic. But so getting creative with your finances, like you do need to talk to a lender early, not just 30 days before you want to start buying a house. So surprised me how much, you know, not paying off student loans and not paying off the rest of your car actually was not going to help you. You know, if I have so many people that are like, I haven't talked to my lender yet, I still need to pay off my car, and they only have like $4,000 left on their car or something. And I'm like, no, talk to the lender first, because they don't realize that having that monthly payment go, you know, through their credit for, you know, over that time is actually helping them, and doesn't actually give them more buying power necessarily, right? If they pay off those things first. So anyways, getting prepared with a lender like well in advance is huge. And talking to those financial experts in your life, I think, is also huge. You know, financial planners, talking to an estate planner, like there's so many different levels of future but I also don't want to overwhelm them, right? So like, I don't maybe talk about all those things. Like my first time home buyer presentation that I go over with my clients is only like 30 minutes, because it's like, we don't want to give them milk before the meat, right? And so, because it's daunting. Yeah. So I'll talk to them about, like, you know, we'll talk about their finances and how they talk to a lender, but like you could do roommate situations where you buy with a roommate. Just getting creative, thinking outside the box. You don't have to be a husband and a wife, like, clearly, right? Like, it could be all sorts of different options for who's buying and how you do it.
And so what's that like, you know, when you get, let's say, either a young couple or, like you mentioned, a teacher, when they realize, based on having a conversation with you or perhaps with a lender, that they actually can do this?
Right. Oh, like, what's it like to have them realize that?
Yeah. And how does it make you feel as far as like, okay, let's go shopping now. Let's go, you know, let's go look for something. You know? We'll get you in a home. Right.
No. And that's some of the best, like, this field that I'm in I'm not a gambler, but I feel like it is a high risk, high reward. So I can have some really low lows, and I can have some really amazing highs. And especially those couple that I've had recently, where it's been like 2 teachers, single women, like, got them in. I think back to my mom. Like, my mom didn't get her first credit card in her name until she was like 35. Wow. It just wasn't allowed. Right? Yeah. My mom didn't buy her first car with her own money until she was 47. You know, I talked about these things with her recently, and just like thinking about that, and then watching what these clients are doing, what these women are doing, it just makes my heart sing, you know. Great.
That's so funny. So it's interesting. We planned this well. By happenstance, maybe, that we had Jeni on one of our podcasts as a lender, because the first thing you should do is talk to a lender.
Right, totally. Yeah.
And then, so we did this in the right order.
Yeah, I'd like to think that I did this, you know, very systematically, you know, put it together. It's not happenstance, Kim.
Come on. So, and now we are speaking to a realtor about this. So, you mentioned that people can, you know, buy a home, maybe a single female can buy a home and then rent out a room. What are some other things that are happening out there to help younger people get in their first home?
Well, there are definitely buying programs out there for like down payment assistance, but you should talk to a good lender about that. And then one thing that I kind of like to look again outside the box is looking at the lot size of the homes that you're looking at. And if you're interested, like you mentioned, renting out a room, if you're single, what if you have a lot size that's big enough to build an accessory unit? And I mentioned earlier, like I did build one, and that was actually what got me talking to a realtor that got me moving in this career. Like, who knew that was going to come out of building an accessory unit, right? So for us, my parents live in that back unit, and that's been a huge blessing. Like, it's invaluable, right? Having, especially 4 kids, right? So,
Right.
so that I can't talk highly enough, but so that's another good way to like balance the books and the family. Like if you can't afford it on your own, maybe talk about doing it with your parents. Putting them, like if they have the house that they don't need, they need to downsize, maybe you downsize to the backyard and then the kids live in the front, right? And they can raise their kids, they can have grandma and grandpa in the back. I mean, that's just like one scenario. But if you're working at Apple and you're a bachelor, like what if you also built an accessory unit in your backyard and were able to help pay for that? You know, big chunk of your mortgage, right, could come. I mean, you can rent a lot of these 1-bedrooms around $2,500 easy, right?
Wow.
A month.
That
right?
is so crazy.
Right. And the cost to build, I mean, it's a good, amount in the beginning, but you can we've done the math, like you can pay it off in like 3 years. It's ridiculous how fast you can pay off those you should check my math on that, but
I know. I can just see it on my financial planning software.
That would be a good one to add.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
We should talk about doing something like that, a presentation together. That would be fun.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a big fan. So I'm always looking at lot sizes and what cities will allow accessory units. Not that they won't. There are no cities that are not allowed to. Everybody has to per California, but they're still some cities are still dragging their feet on like restrictions.
So that's what they're called, is an accessory unit. And
I think the proper term is accessory dwelling unit, and the short term, like the acronym is ADU. So that's what you might hear. And then you hear granny unit, you hear mother-in-law quarters, you hear all the other things too. Cottage.
Isn't it so funny how they use that in-law quarters?
Perma-sitters.
In-law quarters. Well, and then for my husband, it was true, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
That's how I like to think about it.
Yeah, you do have to be careful, right? Because the brother can move in and not ever
true.
leave.
Yeah.
So you gotta...
What I think is fascinating, though, is it returns to the old traditional cohabitation almost, like the old big families, 3 generations under one roof.
Yeah.
In this case, maybe it's 2 roofs, but it's still within the same property.
Right. And I could talk about that for a whole nother podcast, like family relationships and like over time and how we've gotten away from things that are very important.
Well, a lot of the people we work with, are defined as approaching and being in the sandwich generation years where they're caring for their children when it comes to preparing them for college education or beyond. And then, of course, they've got aging parents that might have health needs and they want to bring them close. I mean, even in our own case, Kim and I are in that, and we've got aging parents who live and have their own homes. But, we think about their health and thinking about, is there a situation we should be considering whereby we are much closer to each other,
right?
To help them through that process.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And being a novice in real estate, I've looked around sometimes and I say, are there that many homes out there with an
accessory
ADU?
units? Right. Yeah. Well, they're becoming more and more, popular. But like San Jose, you have to have at least 3,000 square foot lot, which seems tiny, but and Santa Clara is 6,000 square feet. So it just depends on your city. But I do feel like they're becoming more and more popular, but it's hard. Like realtors, I think, don't even know how to categorize them on the MLS. So that's a thing I think that's going to have to be more readily, like easily accessed through the MLS, is making sure there's a way to do a right? Like a multifamily house. But is that really in that category? It's not a duplex, not a fourplex. Like, I mean, it is, but it's detached. Anyway, so then people are having a hard time figuring, and you have to do multiple searches in order to find those homes.
Right.
Well, what I like about it is that, knowing my parents, that they would like that independence. They would still want to have, like my mom would still need her own kitchen. I know that,
right.
Because she likes to cook and the kinds of meals that my dad likes to eat, and they would have their own kitchen and such. But by the same token, I love the idea of, if we had to go out of town, that they're right there,
Right.
So,
Nana would be taken care of. That's our dog.
Nana, super dog, and our intern would be taken care of as well.
Yeah, no, and in my case, it's my dad that needs the kitchen, right? And my husband that needs the kitchen. So, like, my mom and I, we like to eat chocolate and have, like, TV dinners. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting, too, how what got you into the business is now you were kind of ahead of your time then in looking at wanting to develop this additional accessory unit or.
Yeah. And it just came out of necessity, right? Like we were looking, my parents wanted to retire. So we are in that sandwich generation too, where our parents are aging and raising kids. And so it did seem like the perfect scenario for us that we'd win-win, right? Like they get to be close to grandkids. We get a little bit of help with grandkids. So.
That's awesome.
So one of the questions I always get with first-time home buyers is this the right time? And when you think about, is this the right time? I think in general, they want to buy that long-term home.
Right.
But they have to think differently. This is where you have to get creative and say, just be comfortable for a few years so you actually can buy real estate in California and have a little plot of land, right? So how do you answer? Rates just went down. I can't believe how low they are again. But then, you wonder because prices are still pretty high.
Right. Well, we're still in a heightened market. It has slowed down, meaning, it's a little more normal of a market. It's not like things just fly off the shelf in 3 days with multiple offers, all cash, options. Those days seem to be in the past for now. I'm not saying they're not coming back, but they
less cash deals right now.
Well, it's just more like you have one, maybe two offers, and they might not be over asking. So those are, or it takes 3 weeks to get an offer versus like setting an offer deadline for the Wednesday after the first weekend of open houses, right? I mean, that's the market we were living in the last couple of years. So it has what we call softened. I don't want to say it's shifted and it's going dramatic, but it's more of a normal market, or it's heading in that direction of more of a normal market. But true confessions, like I'm a realtor and I just bought a house October 2009 or in July of 2019. So I got a killer interest rate. I was super excited about the fact that the house was on the market 45 days and nobody wanted it. Right. So, not nobody, but there were offers, but just not what the seller was looking for. Right. So it just is a matter of finding that right buyer for the right house. And sometimes now it's actually taking a little bit of time to find it. So I do feel like it's softened, but I don't feel like it's anything that we should need to be like terribly worried about. Like long term, the Bay Area is a huge gold mine, like for real estate, for tech, for jobs, for recreation, like none of that's going away.
Right.
So I like to tell my first time home buyers, as long as you know you're going to be here, you can buy in this market, even though it still feels heightened. You might watch it go down a little bit, and then we bought in 2009 and our first home, and we watched it go down, and we were like, what did we do? But then we watched it 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, do great things. So just because it's a certain way now doesn't mean it's going to be better.
Right. And
or worse.
We hear, people are moving out of state, but sometimes I tell my friends and clients in Illinois, don't forget, we have great weather.
Right. Don't leave.
And we can go to the beach or to the mountains in, just a couple hours time sometimes. Right. And so while people will move out, the minute we have a discount in real estate prices, more people will want to flood in.
Right.
We have natural demand here.
Yes, definitely. So I'm fourth generation California native in my family. So my passion for this area runs pretty deep, I feel like, and I've lived all over the Bay Area. I've lived in the Peninsula, I've lived in the South Bay, I've lived in the East Bay. So I know all the different areas pretty well and have such a love for this area. I do feel like it's golden. It's called the Golden State for a reason. And I visited lots of other places, and their weather just
and we lived in other places. Let me tell you, it's a big difference, when it's January and you're in a light jacket looking at the Pacific Ocean on a sunny day,
Right.
We actually, last year, we had that experience. It was funny because we posted this on Instagram, at least I did on my personal one, where we had this 1 week where the kids were out of school for the whole week. And the first part of the week we were down in Newport Beach. And so we were on the, in the ocean wearing, not bathing suits, but we were basically light kind of athletic clothes, going out for a walk in the sun. And then at the tail end of the week, we were up in Lake Tahoe snowboarding. So it was just like all
beautiful.
within a span of the week. And so this is why we love here. And this is why we pay a premium for living here. Yeah.
Right. Let's not talk about the traffic, though. Get from point A to point B, but yes. Yeah.
Right.
There are definitely pros and cons.
Right. Pros and cons. Earthquakes over hurricanes or tornadoes. So, yeah, everybody, you've got your pros and cons.
Right.
Too.
But I think the pros definitely outweigh
the cons.
Right.
Okay, so, having this conversation with you, Jeni, it just brings to mind that sometimes, we can look at real estate online as, again, I'm a novice, and not find the features that we really want.
Right.
Like, how would you search for a house with a ADU?
Right, accessory unit.
Yeah, in the back. And you mentioned not even the realtors are categorizing these things right.
Right.
So what are some other things that the modern family is looking for in their homes?
Well, and modern family is definitely
a weird term.
Right? Well, I mean, because it could be, 2 women, it could be 2 men, it could be a man and a woman, it could be 4 kids. Well, that's pretty rare, right? Who has 4 kids? But it could be, 2 kids, could be no kids, could be, what do we call them, dinks? Have you heard that?
Could be 4 dogs.
Right. Double income, no kids, but 4 dogs. Right. Like, who are your babies? They're fur babies, right? So, so you have so many different options for families. So I guess it depends which one we're talking about. So depending on what, who my client is, because I'm paying attention, right, to what their family situation is, and it could be all different types. So there's those those clients that want new. And that to me is very different than a client because a lot of the homes in the area have a little bit of land and they're from the 50s and 60s, so they need a little bit of work. And so people don't want, so it depends.
Yeah.
What I'm listening for what they're looking for, and I'm trying to get that for them. But I would say for me and my client base, like I have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring and selling. And then I have a lot of first-time home buyers that are wanting new. And so I feel like trying to navigate between those two worlds can be tricky. Like I have to know both markets.
Right. So that's interesting because I was taking this from the perspective of if I'm going to sell my house, and we built this office in this house. And the idea was, somebody that has a home business would really appreciate this.
Right.
But at the same time, now I negate the factor that if somebody has an aging parent living in their home, there's no bedroom downstairs.
On the main floor.
I've just taken that away.
Well, and it's interesting how hard it is for people to visualize. Like once something is in place, like this is a really great home office, right? And so, but they needed that mother-in-law in the main floor. So it's funny to me how people can walk into a house and really not see, but once it's set up, like that's the beauty of staging, right? Because staging, like if you have an empty room versus a room that's staged properly, it makes a world of a difference. And I think if it's personal items, like clogging up the whole entire room, or if it's staged with air and you can see things and it's like you can see the walls and you can see the floors and you can see the opportunities and the options for the room, like that makes a huge difference. But like stapling in what a room could be does actually limit your buyer pool, and they can't visualize it. So it just depends on, I'll get that buyer every once in a while that can see the go into the 1960s property that hasn't been touched, right? And they're able to visualize it, but it's very rare.
Yeah, it's interesting because the last time before we purchased this home and we went out, we were doing the shopping and there was a couple new developments and they had the model homes. And every single model home that I'd walked in, which was staged, and they do, an outstanding, amazing job.
Right.
It was like every house I walked in is like, oh yeah, I like that. I could live here. Like, just keep it furnished like this. I'll take this one. I don't even need my furniture anymore.
Right.
But we found ourselves, because we were at that point no longer first-time home buyers, that we actually wanted something that was a little bit more established that we could modify. And so fortunately, I guess we were visionary enough to walk in here and say, well, this would be a good place for the home office. I say home studio, but home office, right? And be able to look at the kitchen and go, I don't like the kitchen, but we can remodel it, which we did.
Right.
And so you slowly make it your own.
Right. Well, and even my husband, like, he does not want to walk into a home and have a project. Like, he wants, and I'm the opposite. Like, I can go in, I can see the vision, and I'm like, I want to do it myself. I want to pick my quartz. I want to pick my floors. Like, but he's just like, all he sees is the headache and the, like, living through it and the numbers. And anyway, so yeah, it depends. Every client's different and their needs are different. But I do try, I mean, of course, right? Like, trying to listen to what they really need and they're looking for.
Right.
And knowing the market, doing those tours, the broker tours, and making sure I know what's out there and what's available. And if I know that they're a person that can visualize, then I can take them to the 60s house. If I know they're a person that maybe has a harder time seeing what the potential is, then I'll take them to like a newer home or it's staged well, or, you know, those kind of things. But like, I don't know, neighborhood is so much of what the house is, right? So I really stress to my clients, like, you've got to be the one that drives through the neighborhood or walks through the neighborhood, not me, because my version of safe might be very different than your version of safe. Right. And so, and I tell them, don't just go there at 6 o'clock in the evening, like, go there again back at 11 p.m., you know, 11 a.m., like, go different times of the day, because the neighborhood can change. And you might get there, you know, we're showing it at 11 and there's tons of parking. And then at 6 p.m., there's no parking left. Like, everybody's home from work. And those are things you need to think about.
It was so interesting just from the standpoint, never really thought of it as much of like a matchmaker almost. We're matching the personality and the specific needs, values, and who these people are with a living environment, whether it's a neighborhood or a specific house that is actually going to make them feel at home.
Right.
That's the important thing.
I did a ride along with the Morgan Hill Police Department as part of the Leadership Morgan Hill experience. And it was interesting to see the city in his eyes, places I never thought were unsafe here in Morgan Hill. And he's like, this is where everything happens when it gets dark at night. Right. And it was interesting because then I saw in one of those segments, you know, a lot of new homes going in. I said, wow, how unfortunate for these people that have no clue until they live there that it's like that. And part of the benefit of the new homes is it will clean up the neighborhood. But at the same time, I said, how do you know? And they said, call the police department. If you're going to buy a house, call the police department. They know
and I tell my clients, go to crimereport.com, like check Megan's Law, like check all those things before. And again, like, they have to be the ones with the eyes on it. It can't be me saying, hey, I saw this on Megan's Law, you might want to look out, because what they might read might interpret very differently than what I might read.
Well, what Jenny shared reminds me a little bit about what your sister did before she moved into her neighborhood, which I thought was fascinating. So she interviewed neighbors or potential neighbors, right?
Okay, so my sister she was raised as a anchor woman and news reporter. Cool. So she loves to interview people.
Okay.
Carry a microphone. She's like, tell me what you think about the neighborhood.
What do you like about it?
She knocked on people's doors and talked to them. She has a dream neighborhood.
She does.
Like, literally, one of her neighbors that she's really close to sold her house and bought a house 3 doors down because her house, she couldn't build a pool on it, and they could at the other house. And so it's so crazy to think you would sell the house and the same exact cul-de-sac and buy another one.
This has been confusing for the mailman right now. I used to deliver at 325, now I got to deliver at 329, you know.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
She did? Really?
Yeah.
Same cul-de-sac.
Yeah. And I mean, because
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. No, things in real estate are interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm a people person, so I also like to encourage my clients to talk to the neighbors. Or if I see them and my client's too scared to talk to them, I'm totally all about, like, I'll come talk to you and ask questions and find out things if my client's shy.
Yeah, I would never have even thought of that. So it's really good to have professionals in the business telling you what to do.
Thinking about things you'd never think about.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Okay, so it was really interesting. Victor and I were at a conference for Cambridge, and they were talking about what is the biggest emerging market in the world.
People thought China, India.
Right.
But it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. It was women.
Aha. I like it.
And so, I constantly am thinking about my market, women in the technology industry. And I also think that I do have some single women as well that make it more of a challenge in terms of buying here in the Bay Area. So what would you say in terms of giving them advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things to cover, but the biggest ones would be looking at your options financially, like with lending, because there are first-time homebuyer programs out there. There are, especially for teachers, there's housing trust programs. There's BMRs, which is below market rate. So you can qualify. Depending on your income, you can qualify for up to 50% off of what the market value of it. These are new homes, right? So these are the times where I am happy to see lots of high-rise, condo townhomes getting built, because I realize there's enough, there's an opportunity for BMRs there. And I have had clients get into those BMRs. Makes me really happy. So that could be a good fit for like a first-time home buyer that's single female. But it also like makes me so happy to see that demographic rising, right? I mean, and like I said, this was like an unexpected great part of my life, has been having a career. And so specifically for women, like I really have a little, I don't want to be gender biased, but a little specific, like a little more of a rush, right? When a female is able to do it, to get into that first home on their own.
Right. And I think that sometimes they're intimidated by so many pieces of the process. It's, and oftentimes women underestimate how much they do know.
Right.
And that lack of confidence is to say, well, how am I going to talk to a lender? Because I'm not really going to understand what they're telling me. Or, I think it happens in my business too with investments. It's like, I don't want to come off as dumb.
Right.
And so I avoid it, and I think I can't do it. And sometimes it's really mental.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I like to hope that the newer generation of women are not as intimidated and feeling inadequate as maybe our generation has. And then our, my parents' generation even more so, right? So every generation's getting a little bit more confident, it seems. And so that is encouraging to me. But yes, when I am with those women that I can feel their lack of confidence or reassurance, then I love being able to show those opportunities or programs that are out there and really try to give them that boost of encouragement, because it is possible. I've been watching it happen. And it, like I said, it's almost extra rewarding when it does.
And that's so interesting. I was just working with somebody and doing a financial plan for them, and we were looking at rent versus own. And that is such a big topic here, because you hear a lot of people say it's not worth it to own because the prices are so high. But when I pulled the numbers for this specific one couple, and we were looking at how much they were spending right now in rent, the equity involved, and I could demonstrate it in a
paper,
plan.
right, in a spreadsheet,
Yeah, and I was like, no, in the end, like right now, your investments are going to go down, and it's going to look worse in the short term.
Feel strapped,
But in the long term, the ownership of that home really did make an impact on their net worth over time.
Yeah, and that goes back, like, I just feel like it keeps going back to the question that I give my first-time homebuyers, which is, can you see yourself in that home for 10 years? Because if you can, this is the place to buy.
Right. And even, sometimes you have to think, if you can't see yourself in 10 years, could you rent it out?
Right. That's another portion to it, is like making sure that because you don't want, I'm not saying like spend 3 times your income on that monthly payment in 10 years it'll pay off. Like, I promise. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, like, if the numbers make sense enough,
right?
Like, it's going to feel really stretched and really uncomfortable maybe for those first like couple years, but in the long term, like 10 years down the road, yes, maybe you do get a job change. Maybe you want to live by your parents in North Carolina, whatever it is, because they retire and leave California, right? So if they have that change, like, can they rent out the home for about the amount of their mortgage? Like, making sure the numbers really do work.
Right. So I think I hear, in summary, location,
Oh,
right?
Surprise, surprise.
Right. Yeah.
And there has to be a high demand of people living here.
Yeah, right.
You know, we're looking at some real estate investments in other areas, and it's
Right.
like, we want the fastest growing cities
Right.
in the
America.
country.
Right. Yeah. That's been a whole nother part of my career that I also didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy, is thinking about investments and long-term planning. And, you know, I'm, again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but with my aspirations as a kid, like thinking about financial planning, estate planning, like having a lawyer help draw up papers for any kind of thing in my life, which just wasn't really, I don't know, it just
Right.
wasn't in my, and so aligning myself with people, professionals, and finding networks of people that I trust and I want to use and now need to use for myself, but being able to meet the right people and find the right people that I can hand to my clients. It's a very intimate handoff, right, to me. Like, I want to make sure that they're taken care of and that they're making good decisions that I didn't even think about. And again, I think it makes me want to research them even more, or like dive deep. And maybe that stuff just came naturally to other people, but for me, it felt very foreign. And so every time I get to meet a new vendor or like a vocation of something that was never even like in my realm of possibilities, it's so rewarding to not only realize like that's so valuable to me, but that I can pass that on to a client and make that valuable to them.
That's so true.
It feels good. It feels good, man. Helping people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Having your team of resources and being able to connect people. Because I think that warm introduction a lot of times is what can make the experience
right.
much more pleasant.
And I think you can feel it, right? And I think your client feels it. They feel when you mean it, right? Like they feel it when you have that passion or like surprise. Like for me, a lot of it's been surprise that these things have come into fruition. And so when they're, I don't know, just like dumb things, like I'm part of this women's group that's fundraises for education for women that are in need, like whether it's undergrad or graduate work, like it's anyway. So every year we sell poinsettias to fundraise, and it's like our biggest fundraiser of the year.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Call me.
Yeah. Do you need some?
Yes.
I actually just started selling them this week. But like the funny thing is like I'm not a poinsettia person, or I wasn't, I should say. And these poinsettias come from Gilroy, this nursery in Gilroy.
Right.
They are gorgeous. And here I am, this person that's like, I don't really like poinsettias. And now I'm like, poinsettias are amazing. And during the holidays, they're even more amazing. And like, but the thing is I think people feel that from you and they're like, now I want to buy a poinsettia. But that's like, it's real. Like, it goes from all walks of life for like things, if you're passionate about it. And like, then I love it because it goes towards a good cause. Right. But
yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
I think I want to get in the pumpkin spice game somehow. I mean, as soon as October hit, it's like everything's pumpkin this, pumpkin that. But,
right.
But we do like poinsettias, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Gets us into that festive spirit.
Right. And they're great client gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
true.
Yeah.
Note for Tim. Writing that down.
Right.
This has been so good just because, to unravel, if you will, and understand a little bit more about your world. But I keep thinking about, it feels great. I know for Kim, it feels great for us when we work with someone and go through some of these aha moments where we're able to illustrate, hey, you can retire at this age, or you can get this second home, and helping them through those scenarios. And I'm just thinking it must feel really good knowing that you are helping people to find their home, not a house, home. And it's a difference, I think, as opposed to a property versus a place where they're going to raise their kids, or a place where they're going to, continue their family. And
well, and I love that because I've lived here my whole life, like I know not only my own peers that are starting that journey of like finding that home and then raising their kids there. It's just beautiful to watch. But I also have my parents' friends and, you know, their little network of people that they have become long-term friends with. And for a lot of them, this home that they raised their kids in that they need to downsize is their retirement, right? Like they're almost counting on that as
absolutely
right. And so I have to help navigate them through this world of like, your house has so much potential, you know, if they haven't done anything to it, or like, I love what you've done. Let's get you the most bang for your buck for what you've done with this house. Right. And show it in its best form. And so it's almost like watching the beginning and the end, right? Like, I mean, not that the retirement is the end because it's another beginning of a beautiful part of life, but for those people that are moving out of state to Arizona, like they'll have that reassurance of having paid off their mortgage at their new place and then having some spending money to do their retirement. And it's huge.
Absolutely. Cause I am seeing that happen
over and over.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people leaving and having that good, healthy chunk of money in addition to paying for a home in cash in another state.
And you know, half my heart is like so happy for them and the other half is like, don't leave. Like,
right.
It's the Bay Area. How can you leave? But I get it. Like it's, and especially if their kids are feeling like they can't stay here, then they move to another state. Then the parents want to be by their kids, right? And their grandkids. So I get it. I just might be a little sad about it.
Because you're human and you care.
Right. I just,
That's great. Well, before we let you go, we have some additional questions. Now, we didn't prep you for this, but we are asking all our guests the following 3 questions. So, number 1, what would be a favorite vacation destination? So that if you had some time off and you wanted to go to relax or just adventure, where would you go?
So I think right now, I would go to Bali.
Yeah.
I know, it seems so far and hard to get there. I know it's like a couple different flights, but I think once you got there, it would be so like, I love the idea of silence because I think I am surrounded by a little bit of chaos and like a lot of things in my brain trying to remember everything that we need to do during the day. But Bali, I think I would go by myself. Is that terrible?
No, because the movie just came on TV recently.
Oh, Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's my idea of Bali.
I guess that's where, and I don't know if, it's like come out on Netflix or something. So it's like in my brain, but Bali was the first thing that came to
just
mind.
The crystal blue waters. Disconnect. No Wi-Fi, no internet.
Right.
Off the grid.
Have you seen that IKEA? They have this huge artwork that says no Wi-Fi. I kind of love
it. That's funny.
Disconnect. Well, you mentioned Netflix, so that was my second question. Do you have a favorite book or show on Netflix that you've been enjoying?
Oh, so I just watched, my daughter's 12. I just watched the whole Gilmore Girls series with her.
Oh,
it was so fun. If you have a daughter and she's the right age, I highly recommend. So I have a husband that travels a lot. So we had a lot of like downtime where it could just be me and her when the other kids were asleep. So we would watch it together. Now I'm like, what are we going to do? Gilmore Girls is over.
I know.
But luckily I do like podcasts. So I listen to podcasts too.
That's good.
I watched some of Gilmore Girls and then I don't know what happened. I just lost it or something.
Right.
You got to watch it with Mika or something.
Yeah.
Just have a girls.
Did she watch it?
No, but my sister and my niece did watch it together.
I feel like it might be like you have to hit the right age because like she's still willing to sit and like almost snuggle with me. Almost.
That's a good one. Then the last one, let's bring it back to technology here. Is there an app you couldn't live without?
My Google Calendar app. Like I've got it color coordinated and my husband and I share it. I share it with my assistant. Like, yes, that's the one. It's huge.
That's the one.
I am actually, now that you say that, I'm really proud that it's like not Facebook or Instagram, but you can edit that out. But like it is Google Calendar is probably my number one used.
It's good. It's practical.
Yeah,
it gets the job done.
Practical.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that. I know. Well, it's funny because I have this sticker you can see on the back of my computer. It says, "If it's not in red tail, it didn't happen." And that's my CRM system. So, I can identify with a favorite app being
it was
something
funny. It was like
that
somebody actually made a sticker of what she's always telling us already.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Right.
So they must have heard it more than once.
Right. It's like that twist on if it happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
Right. That's cute.
So, Jenny, if people want to learn more about you or get in contact, if they have questions because of everything that you shared today, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
So I do have a website. It's JN, like Nunn, listings.com. So www.jnlistings.com. I have videos on there. I have, hopefully I'll be putting this podcast on that website. I'm really excited about that. And then my phone number is 510-693-0770. So I am big on texting. So if you are a texter, I'm your girl. Or I'm your realtor, I should say. And then I am on Facebook and Instagram. Maybe we could just link those to the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, we'll include a lot of the links, especially to the website, on the show notes accompanying the podcast. But on behalf of Tech Girl Financial and my co-host, we want to thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm big on affirmations and I'm big on being grateful. And so I just feel like, again, because of the way I was raised, I didn't see this as my future. And so I feel like I have to give some, gratefulness to who helped get me to where I am. So I wanted to mention my parents and my husband, who I don't think without him I would have done half the things I've done. And then a couple of those key business people in my life that have, and especially women, right, that have shown me like it's a possibility, it's an option, and you can kill it, right? So my friend Kelly Jensen and Janine Towner, those are the people I wanted to thank.
Oh, I love that.
I love that. We should add that as far as a segment and an affirmation or a thankful section. So we asked 3 questions. We should say, is there anyone you'd like to thank?
Yeah. I know. That is so great. And I'm glad you have that, relationship with your husband. It's like, Victor, we're going to affirm things here, but he's made me do some things that I wouldn't have done on my own. Right. And they've all been positive. It's a little bit of a push. Yeah. But, I love that. Thanks. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take the compliment when you can get it.
I am. Yeah. Wow. You just made my day.
Aww.
Well, this is the Tech Girl Financial Podcast. And as always, I'd like to remind you, what will you do
when your money works for you?
We'll see you next time. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
That was fun.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies.
Skrrr.